In our checklist, we have 7 broad categories of what it takes to put together an effective abuse prevention plan. It starts with a statement of policy. We define abuse. We require screening. We have you look at your operations, how your procedures are. Make sure your premises is safe. Train your workers, the people that are supposed to uphold your abuse prevention plan. And finally, create a response protocol if there's an allegation. Those are the 7 components. What's a statement of policy? It's like a motherhood statement. It's like, you know, we have 0 tolerance for abuse or abusers in the doors of this church. We protect those who are vulnerable in our care. We also protect our workers and from putting them in positions that are vulnerable, awkward, and make it difficult for them to defend themselves if there's an allegation against them that is false. It's twofold. Protect the children, protect your workers. Both are important. Okay? When my own minister got the message from me that we needed to have an abuse prevention plan in our church, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by his response. You know, he's about my age and he's got young children, so he's kind of sensitive to that. But being a minister, most ministers are ministers because they want to do ministry, not because they want to do paperwork or have to say no to people or have to be tough with people, right? But in responding, he thought about it for a while and he said, no, this is a really good thing. We're a community church. This means if we go through this process and do this, we can say to the community around us, we have a safe place. We've gone through these steps. Now, they did this quite a long time ago. We were a little ahead of the curve, probably 96, 97, something like that. So it's been in place for 11 or 12 years now. And it was at a time period when this kind of initiative was met with a lot of negativity. We don't need to do this here. We've had Sunday school teachers here for 30 years. How can we ask Agnes to go down and get her criminal record check, you know? That's what it comes down to, though, doesn't it? And the other thing it comes down to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is ego, right? You ask somebody who's been around the church for a long time to get a criminal record check, what's the response going to be? Maybe what's your response going to be? Maybe what's my response going to be? Don't you trust me? Right? Don't you trust me? I mean, I'm giving tithes and offerings to the church. I've volunteered for everything. I've been around. I do all this, and now you're asking me to get a criminal record check, right? So after you've caught your victims in the hallways and you've made them volunteers, then you start to, you know, fingerprint them and ask for their criminal records, right? So it's okay. But I think part of any good abuse prevention plan is when you're communicating it, get beyond the ego. This is not about you. It's about creating a safe place. It's about creating a safe place for your children, your grandchildren, your friends' children, your nieces, your nephews. We have to do this for everybody. We have to. So get over it. Right? Get over it. Because anything less than that, I'm going to tell you right now, is ego. It really is. And when you express this statement of policy, the beauty of it is that it's a motherhood issue and everything else, but you can express it in terms of your purpose, your statement of purpose as a church. You know, what you're all about in your community, who your community of believers, the family of the church, how you want to present yourself as the church, as your church to your members, your adherents, and your community at large. Okay? This is what we're about. This is important. If you're gonna run youth programs and children's programs, this is what you need to do. And I'm going to sort of use the words of somebody who isn't from within the evangelical circles, but it really is interesting. There were a couple of really famous cases that established some of the vicarious liability requirements that are now expected of organizations, religious and non-religious, in terms of care of children. The 2 cases, one came from British Columbia, one from Alberta. They were referred or appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada in 1999. The 2 cases are Baisley Curry and Jacobi Griffith. There is an article on our website I wrote about these cases and what their implications are. But they were heard on appeal by the Supreme Court of Canada. And by that time, Beverly McLaughlin was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. She is famous for being very activist in terms of how she views the law. And in her previous time as Chief Justice in BC, it was under that time period where British Columbia really became known as California of the North in terms of civil litigation. Okay? What happened in this case when it was appealed is that the Chief Justices looked at both cases, looked at all of the common denominators. One involved abuse of a child in what essentially was an orphanage by an employee. One involved a teenager who was abused by a volunteer at a youth serving organization. And they said, what's common here? What kind of guidelines can we give to future lower courts to decide if an organization is liable or not? They came up with a framework of 5 points. What's really interesting, though, about what she said is that in her commentary, and I'm paraphrasing what she said here a little bit, but basically what she said was, there's no exemptions for nonprofits or charities. It has nothing to do with how big your budget is, how good your purpose is. And she says, I don't care if you're Microsoft or a small organization operating on a shoestring budget that thinks you're doing good. Better you not have run the program at all than put children in a vulnerable position where they can be abused. It kind of echoes a little bit something what Jesus said in a verse 2, right? Okay. So think about that in terms of what ministries do you offer and how safe can you make your ministries, your operations, and your premises. And if you can't show due diligence and take precautionary steps to weed out people who you can find information about, don't run the program. Better not to.